How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Dyson Sphere Program. So I think in this episode what we're going to do is I'm actually going to do a time-lapse of us kind of tearing up a bunch of the factory and kind of replacing it to the new style, because I was kind of contemplating whether or not I wanted to go step by step, kind of with the resource refining area, but I figured, you know what, let's throw in a little bit of a time-lapse of us kind of tearing this up and getting things organized. We more than likely won't get everything done today, but I at least want to get some of the kind of basic components started and laid out. So things like motors, gears, maybe circuits, magnets, stuff like that. And then as we progress, probably in the next episode, we'll focus on some of the more advanced things. So like the CPUs, the superstructure, super magnet stuff, solar sails, things of that nature, right? So things that are going to rely on some of these basic components, but I at least want to get the basic components made, and just kind of start reorganizing the factory into a better system that's going to allow us to A, cut down on all these belts, and B, allow us to primarily start focusing on kind of that scalability to get up to the, I think it's 120 rockets a minute is what I calculated or kind of planned for. Yes, 120 rockets a minute, so that's going to come down to about 2 rockets a second. I know that is kind of low, because I was reading into some people's like rocket per minute, or rather rocket per second, and 120 is a very low number for a lot of people, which it's understandable, especially if they plan on building like a Dyson sphere in every star that they have, but especially if you get to the bigger like blue giants and stuff, because then the Dyson sphere becomes much larger. Plus, if you say built a Dyson sphere all the way out here, like that's going to be a much larger Dyson sphere than if you were to have one like all the way this close, right? And so then, you know, if you have one like this small, very tiny, but if you have one this large, well, you're going to be here for a while, and so obviously, yeah, you're going to get the power that comes with it, but you're also going to get the amount of resource draw. So I figured, you know, our size was plenty for at least what we're doing. But I can see why people are going to have that 120 per second, or, you know, 240 per second, or whatever their preferred amount per second is. But for us, we're just basing our factory on 120 per minute, and so we're going to scale that accordingly. So now I'm going to go ahead and do the time lapse. So see you guys once we're done. I will probably also, side note, I will probably throw in some commentary over it while we are doing the time lapse, just to kind of explain and highlight some of the things that are happening. Primarily just so that way you guys don't get too lost in what's going on, but also so that way we can kind of talk about why we're doing the thing we're doing. So yeah, I will see you guys here in a minute. Alright, so pretty much what we're doing here is just kind of finding an area somewhere in the base that we can kind of start our production area. And so mostly I'm working on a rough design of kind of what I'm thinking each production block's going to look like. In this case, it's going to be something that I can kind of reproduce, because not every single item we're going to be making is going to take the same number of assemblers, nor are they all going to be an easy, super easy number that we can divide, right? So I know some of the things we need like 39, or a couple of them need like 42, and so kind of the way I was kind of going through this thought process of designing our kind of production chain was, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do 10, right? And so then I went on and tried to check, okay, well, can I fit 20 in a row? Didn't really work out as well as I thought, so I just stuck with 10. So our initial design here is we're working on magnets. And so you can see me here kind of setting up a, trying to just kind of visualize how we're going to do inputs and outputs. And it isn't until a little bit later that we'll get into doing the power. And so right now I'm just trying to figure out, okay, how many can I fit And in this case, we needed, I think it was like 40. I think this is the item that needed 49 machines. So I just made 50 because I think it was 49.3 is what it came out to. So it really did end up coming out to 50. I think this is one of those cases in math where your teacher's like, well, you can't have half of a chair, or, you know, half of a student if you have to divide students into groups, right? And well, you can't have half a machine. Now, technically, yeah, it doesn't have to perform all the work in this case, but we do want it to make sure that we don't fall flat. So here I'm basically just trying to tidy things up and kind of come up with, okay, how can we manipulate this so that we can just easily replicate it? And I couldn't end up getting the blueprint to work. I'm not sure if there is a way to get it to work in this instance, but it just, for whatever reason, did not want to copy the sorters into each machine. It just kept copying the belt, not the inserters. I don't know why. I don't know if I have to also copy the machine, but either way, I got it kind of work. And so there's definitely a little bit of a tedious part going through and connecting up all the sorters here. It also took me quite a while to actually gather up everything for all those assemblers. And yeah, I do know that there are the tier 3 assemblers we could be using, but I didn't use them primarily just because I felt that the tier 2 were sufficient. We were making enough machines that we needed anyway. I might eventually down the road upgrade all the machines and then see how that changes our calculations if we keep the same number of machines but just upgrade them. I'm also using blue belt. I don't know if that's quite apparent. That's just in order to maintain enough flow rate. As for power, I went ahead and used the, I actually don't know what those are called. Satellite substations, actually, is what it looks like those are called. And so I went ahead and was applying those, and not that we were going to ever redesign this, but I did space it out so that if I needed to, as you can kind of see there, I did put extra space on each side of the substation so that 3 belts could pass on each side on one layer. Even though, yeah, in this we could do multiple layers, I kind of wanted to make everything as not flat as possible, but less chaotic than it is in other parts of the factory. So here I'm setting up gears, just because those are another fundamental component we're going to need. And mainly I focus on kind of what we're going to need immediately, so we're not really going to be doing any of the complex components in this episode. Those will probably be for next episode, just because those are going to require a lot of the components we're making both this episode, but also some of the other setups that we just haven't done, such as the energetic graphite. And the reason we haven't done the energetic graphite is because the only planet that really has enough coal to support the amount of energetic graphite we're going to need is the planet we're currently on. I think it's Beta Arundi 3. Yeah, because the gas giant's Beta Arundi 4. This planet has a reserve of 7 million, which, yeah, is a lot, but we're going to burn through that pretty quickly. So I do need to go to the other galaxy and kind of start mining that and getting that processed. So here I'm kind of trying to come up with a design that's going to allow us to make the electric motors, or I think it's, or maybe it's the turbines. I can't remember. If you can't tell already, I'm doing the voiceover for this time-lapse part after the fact. So it's been a couple days since I've recorded this, and I currently don't have my notes pulled up as to what I did in each area. So I'm kind of also technically watching this at the same time you guys are and narrating it as best I can. So yeah. Anyway, so my original design was, okay, well, I'm going to do 20 in each area, but then the more I got to thinking about it, I was like, you know, I feel like this is taking up too much space. And then I got to thinking, I was like, well, they need a bunch of inputs. It needs 3 inputs, right? So I can't stack them next to each other, because I was like, okay, I put one input here. Then I was like, okay, let me put another input here. I could put an input here. And then I was thinking, wait a second. There's a space in between the machines. A space we could use. And so then I'm like, okay, you know what? Let's get rid of everything, and I'm going to route the iron in between the machines. And so that way we can route 2 belts right next to the machines, right? Because we've been doing that, and we can hook up machines on both sides. And then I'll route the iron through the middle. And so then that way we can kind of save on a little bit of space and kind of get this just that much more compact. for the next couple stages of this, it does become a little bit problematic, and we'll see that in a little bit, of how I had to route the iron, but it didn't end up being that bad. Everything fit just fine. There was a couple of finicky things because it required 2 belts of iron, and I think we only had 5 actual input belts. And again, we'll see that here in a minute. And so really now it's just going through, making sure everything's placed, copied and pasted the blueprints. Then honestly, inputting the inserters, or sorters, was probably the hardest part. So now at this point, obviously you can see I've pretty much, during this whole day while I was recording this, is I had my inventory, or my internal crafting assembler, constantly crafting belt and sorters and everything. I did have a spreadsheet pulled up on my other monitor as to the amounts I needed of everything, so it wasn't like I was just blindly making 30,000 belt or 20,000 whatever. Those aren't exact numbers, but I certain things I knew how much I needed, so I knew how many assemblers I needed. I knew how many furnaces I needed. Belts and sorters were 2 that I didn't really know how many I needed, partially because of just the design I was going for, so I didn't really know what I was needing there. So then here I had to go back over to Beta Arundi 2 in order to see why we weren't getting any of the titanium. Well, it turns out I was a doofus and forgot to connect it up. So go me, go team, guys. So I went ahead and connected that up, and then notice we are having power troubles. That is partially because this planet was solely reliant on the wind turbines that I placed a long time ago when we first expanded to this planet for the silicon. So we are going to have to figure out a way to get power to the other planets at some point. A couple of the different ways we can do that is, number one being we just utilize the Dyson Sphere we've been building this entire time to, continue building it. And then, but that shouldn't be really too hard to do for the most part, because we just built the solar array things. So now basically I'm coming back here, just making sure that everything's set up properly, and as I've been going, I try to kind of reorganize the base a little bit and just kind of clean things up. So any belts that we're no longer using, I try to clean up, so that way we don't have to worry about kind of just belts going nowhere or coming out of nowhere. I try to do, for the most part, just cleaning everything up. And then here I'm starting to realize, okay, well, I'm going to need the interstellar transport stations. And so I began setting those up to craft, and I don't really know how many I needed, so I just kind of guessed and then made up roughly how many I needed. I did have to get rid of a couple of the miners, but I did replace them just so that they were a little bit less out of in the way. Now, it is important to note that there is the stone field and the coal field over there that you kind of briefly just saw that are going to eventually be in the way of the mining, or not mining, but the production area. And so I do get those tapped just so that way I can get them mined. Not that it's going to take forever, but it is going to take a bit of time. I also, another reason we do need to go to the other planet is so that, or well, the other galaxy. Would it be a galaxy? No, other solar system. That's what it is. Is so that way we can get the crystals we need in order to make the Mark II miners, which are, I think, 30 or 40% faster. I'm not sure. Might even be more than 50%. But we do want to get those miners just so that way we can speed up the process of ore harvesting, especially when we're on worlds that are a little bit further away, and we do want to get a little bit more ore in transport. As for, let's see, kind of the next couple of things, I just went ahead because I was waiting on belt to craft and sorters. You can kind of see what I was talking about, how we were going to run into the issue, but it luckily did work out here for just the kind of current moment. But basically while I was waiting for belt to craft and sorters, I was going through and placing down all the machines. I didn't immediately realize that gears were not what I wanted to put there. It was the correct number of machines, but just not for gears. It was, I believe, for circuits is what we ended up putting there. And so really here I'm just kind of waiting for things to craft, and I'm going through and seeing what I can do in order to speed up basically the production of basic things such as motors and gears, because some of those things were running out, and I didn't have science going for pretty much most of this, mainly just so that way I could kind of get that backlog of resources, but unfortunately some of them were just so extensive. Now, I did try to only craft things directly if I had the intermediate products, so I tried to refrain from actually crafting any of the intermediate products in my inventory. Um, Here you can actually see me trying to place down some basically support foundation, and for the most part I've effectively covered this planet everywhere I could that had land visible, because that does give you a little bit of soil back, especially if it's in kind of more of a like hilly mountainous terrain. Then you can get quite a lot back. But at this point I don't have any more soil, and so I couldn't really foundation anymore, so that's fine. But we did kind of run into that problem. Um, but for the most part, just like when I was doing achievement hunting in Factorio, I focused heavily on making sure that my inventory was constantly crafting. I don't think I let it not craft for the entire duration of this recording session. But here I'm just kind of going through seeing if there's any miners that had finished on Beta Arendi 1. I don't believe any did, or at least I didn't see any that did. Because it was at this point that I realized that the coal and the stone were going to be in the way, and even though I didn't need to move them now, and sure, I could just hide them and build on top, I didn't really want to, mainly because I felt that that'd be wasteful in a game that, although had, yes, quite a lot of resources, I felt didn't have nearly the same number of like unlimited resources as like Factorio or other games I've played have, where you can build on top over around ores that just aren't really that important. But in this case, I feel like most every ore patch is important because we've almost mined everything from this planet. So I figured, you know what, we're gonna need it, especially because it was coal. The coal was the closer one. If it was stone, I'd be a little more open to building on top of it. But in our case here, it was coal, so I didn't feel that that was going to be something we could justify, mainly because we are going to need it for the energetic graphite. Because I think we have close to 300 some odd furnaces for energetic graphite. I'll have to check the math on that, but it is quite an extensive bit. We haven't really hooked up a lot of those furnaces because, like I said earlier, we don't have the connection to a stable just amount of coal. Now, this planet, does have the 7 million, but I don't know how long that supply would last at the amount of furnaces we have. And some of the more advanced products, such as the sulfuric acid, the graphene sheets that you see me collecting here, and the plastics and stuff, those are probably going to have to be scaled up in their own maybe time lapse. If you guys enjoy this kind of sort of format of seeing a lot of the behind the scenes and kind of cutting out some of that fluff, definitely let me know. I mean, I know there is going to be fluff in this. Pretty much every video is going to have a little bit of fluff, but let me know how you like this format. If you prefer to see more behind the scenes like this and kind of going over it, or if you want more of the condensed kind of, okay, I'm going to do this and then I just do it, versus, kind of this watching me through the process of kind of setting it up. And not that you see my entire thought process of when I design something, but my overall, like, okay, I'm kind of placing this here, and you can see, okay, well, I placed it here because of this, or kind of that, right? Versus, okay, well, I did all these things, they're done, now let's do this new thing, right? Without much explanation. If you guys enjoy this kind of format, definitely leave a thumbs up on the video, and if you have any questions, comments, or concerns about anything you've seen or didn't see, definitely let me know, because I'll definitely try to explain it. And or if you want a blueprint of something and you can't quite get it from pausing, definitely ask, and I'll do my best to kind of upload it either to the paste bin. Actually, I think there's a Dyson Sphere Program like blueprint thing that I can upload to, but I'll have to look into that because I've not done that. Here I noticed when I did my air, I'm like, wait a second, I have two gears set up, so let me go ahead and change everything over to the circuits. Here's where I start to set up the inputs for everything. So I realize that each transfer station only has 12 inputs slash outputs, and so I kind of had to calculate how many that I would need. For some of them, I didn't really calculate the exact flow rates, so I didn't know, like, okay, gears need 1 blue belt worth of iron. I kind of just plugged in 3 belts of iron, or or of iron ore, or not ore, iron plate, and just called it good. However, from not saying I did that to all of them, but I think I did that to one or two of them. But otherwise, I did look at how many belts worth of an item did I need? That way I could better understand kind of the demand of each station, so that way I wouldn't just have 40 stations for each thing, right? Because, sure, I could have. I could have had one transport station per production column, but I felt for efficiency's purpose. Actually, I don't know if that would be more efficient. If having one kind of transport station for each production column is more efficient, or just having more belts is more efficient. Um, Not really sure on that one. But basically, I have continuously kept my inventory crafting. There were a few instances, I think, where it did get close or completely stopped, but for the most part, I just kept mathing everything out and really just trying to do what I could with what I had when I had it. And so if I ran out of something, I would switch gears and be pretty quickly to something else, because in a game like this, Factorio or Satisfactory, there's usually something for you to do. Even if you're just kind of waiting for things to craft, there's usually something you can do with what little you have. And so I think it's here where I realize, okay, well, how many belts or how many things of gears am I gonna need? And then I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna look at how many exactly I need instead of inputting 3 belts of gears. That is kind of wasteful. I'm gonna look at it, and it turns out it was only one, and I could actually streamline it such as this, and kind of just go over each of the belts, and so it would flow to the end. Now it is very much ratioed out, so that way by the time the gears got to the end of that belt, they would be used, so there wouldn't really be any backlog. And I know for some people that is a little bit concerning, because they might see it as, oh, but then you don't have enough gears. Well, I do. It's just they're being used in, not in a perfect ratio, but they are being used pretty close to it, right? Because just because the gears aren't building up on the bus, or I say bus from when I was playing Factorio, but just because they're not building back up on that belt doesn't necessarily mean we don't have enough. As long as all the machines are functioning, then we have enough gears, and we can always technically add more, right? Because in the event that, oh no, the last machine is being starved, we could add another lane of gears to interject somewhere in the middle. That way it kind of gets that fresh injection of gears. And here you can kind of see what I was talking about with the iron, and so I realized, okay, well, I could go every other lane to put iron on. So then I was thinking, okay, well, I could put splitters, but then I'm like, no, you know what, I want to try to get it as, not compact as possible, but I do want to get it quite seamless if I can. And so I was just kind of going through experimenting, and then kind of realized that there were the other sorters that I have used. I want to try to integrate them more into my builds, and so I was just trying to think of the best way to get 2 lanes of iron in. And so I was like, okay, well, I could do that. And then because it needed 2 blue belts worth of, or I think it was 1.9 belts of iron plate exactly. And I was like, okay, well, how could I do this so that it works, right? Because it's basically 2.5 lanes, right? And the middle one will be the one that gets the, that the 0.5 from each to make it whole. But then I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to use a slip lane, and then in the middle one, that's where it's going to interject the rest of the iron. I suppose I could have maybe interjected on the third one, or not the third one, the fourth one, but I figured, you know what, it was fine. And so here's where I basically start setting everything up, and things will start functioning, because everything has power at this point. And so really it was just making sure that we could maintain enough production, and I also had to make sure that we could maintain enough transport capacity. Here was another one of those challenges, because I didn't quite realize how close I placed the station, and I was like, well, I could either move it, which I really don't want to, because it is full of iron plate, or I could do what I did on the other area, and I routed items and kind of that circular conveyor belt, kind of like at the airport, right, where your luggage goes round and round. That's effectively what I did here with the resources, and so I was just making sure that we could do that here as well without really having any sort of issues. And it was just kind of brainstorming it with myself in such a way that made sense. Sometimes that's what you got to do, is you just kind of got to sit there and kind of think about it for a second. And there are times while I was playing this that I don't know how clear it is from the time lapse, but there were definitely points where I kind of just stood there and kind of sat back and looked at the overall picture and was like, okay, so this is going to go here. These machines are going to go to these. And there were definitely a few moments, even from that, where I was just like, okay, I definitely need to take a break for a minute just to kind of refresh my eyes and my brain, because this is the type of game, especially once you start getting to kind of that end game of scaling everything up that you've been doing for the entire time that you've been playing in that playthrough, you really begin to think about, okay, so if this goes to this is going to go to this, and then whatever I'm doing is going to affect all these other systems, right? And so it's, you quickly go from, okay, well, I'm doing task A, then I'm doing task B, to, okay, well, task A is going to affect everything all the way to task G, so I need to make sure that everything can handle this sudden surge of stuff, right? And so I definitely think that your first couple playthroughs of really any game like this is going to be just thinking about, okay, I want to get to this goal. I want to, do whatever. Might be a little bit sloppy, but then the second or third time you go through, then you start to kind of look at it like, okay, now I can see why the person I was watching or the person I saw do this made it this large, or kind of scaled things a certain way, right? And because it might not necessarily make sense to have like this many motors, but then you quickly realize, oh, they're actually being used in this production chain that is just massive, right? Because I definitely think that when I was playing, I didn't really think about scalability with some of the builds I did, and I definitely didn't think about, oh, okay, well, how does this thing connect to this thing? Like, I knew everything kind of worked towards science, just like in Factorio, and, we are working towards that Dyson Sphere build, but I don't think I really realized where we were at in terms of how we were going to get there, in just what we had built. And then it was like, okay, we actually have to tear up a bunch of what we had. I don't think we actually did any of the demolition yet to the factory. That is gonna be happening kind of near the end of this time lapse, but we definitely get there with how we kind of, I don't want to say tore things up, but we did do some demolition. Not a lot. Like, we didn't clear out a massive area, but we did start to take down some of the assemblers. So really here, we're just kind of going through and making sure that everything can keep getting placed, and definitely this was one of the more tedious parts because I couldn't get the blueprints to work. Honestly, if I were to do this again, I would make sure that your blueprint, that you know how to blueprint it properly. I don't know if I'm not aware of how to blueprint sorters onto machines, or what, but definitely leave that down below. If you guys know how to do that, blueprint the sorters so you can just copy and paste them onto the machine so you don't have to manually place them, that'd be great. I'm sure there is a way, I just didn't figure it out, and I didn't want to kind of fuss with it. I just wanted to get building, because honestly, this is one of those things in a game where once I get going, I'm good, right? It's just like writing an essay, or when I'm in a good programming kind of vibe. It's amazing, but it's, I think, getting started that I was like, okay, I don't know what to do first, and so I was like, fuck it, let's just do magnetic coils and go from there, and that's what I did. And so really, I started putting things in order that I knew they would be needed. In this case, I then did the electromagnetic turbines, right? Because I know that they were going to need things that we had already made. Circuits were weird because those just needed iron and copper. We could import those whenever or wherever we needed. And so again, that's just another one of those things that we did. And so kind of as we go along here, we're really just going to keep hooking everything in, making the sorters. I keep calling them inserters because really that's what they are in my mind from other games I've played, because that's really the action they perform. I did try to line things up here, but unfortunately you just can't always line things up in a build. You can sometimes try to, put the round peg in the square hole, or the square in the round hole type scenario, but I didn't really feel like doing that. And then I also realized, oh, there's actually 4 belts we need to put in, not 3. So that kind of helped it a little bit, but, there's only so much we can go with that. Pretty much, at this point, I was just beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel, at least for today's kind of recording session of like, okay, let's hook everything up. Let's make sure we have enough input on every belt. We didn't necessarily have enough raw input of everything. I think our main limiting factor was the magnetic coils, because I don't think we had enough iron to those yet on Beta Rindy 2, but I did try to make sure that we increase that at some point. And then here I'm just waiting for a couple things to craft, and also just try to figure out, okay, well, what did the circuits need? And there were a couple of moments that you'll see me pause, and those were just me checking my spreadsheet and also checking the production calculators to make sure that we had everything we needed. So in here I was just like, okay, well, we're gonna hook this up like this. And I think this is one where I didn't really think about, okay, well, I need one belt of iron, one belt of copper. I just kind of went ahead and said, you know what, we're just gonna build this. It worked. It was fine. And pretty much this is kind of where I was like, hey, you know what, we're starting to get good production of things. This is amazing. And I didn't go overboard on the storage for the final product, because I figured, you know what, we're kind of starting to really get to that end that I don't think we're going to need it. I think a lot of time will end up being spent AFK anyways, not really doing anything. Once we, because we are going to get to that point where I'm probably just going to have to open the world and leave it AFK for a little bit while we build the Dyson Sphere. And then once it's built, then we'll definitely call it. As for the next series that I think is going to replace Dyson Sphere, because Minecraft's going to probably go for another couple weeks. I don't know how many weeks to be exact, but I think Dyson Sphere will probably end, because it was going at 3 episodes a week, just like Minecraft, but I think I'm going to scale I'm going to scale this back to, I think, 1 episode a week, and Minecraft up to 4 times a week. So it is going to cut the total number of episodes of stuff down from 6 to 5, but that's just because right now at the time of recording, I am 2 weeks away from finals, so I'm getting kind of busy with some things, right? And so not able to put in 6 episodes worth of stuff, but also at the same time, part of that's because I don't really want to put out 5 episodes of Minecraft every week. That does get a little bit burdensome for me. So 4 is kind of where I can stretch that to. With this, it's definitely going to probably only be once per week right now, just because this I think took me a total of like 2 or 3 hours to record, just because of the amount of stuff I had to wait to craft, and just kind of a bunch of other things. Here you can see me actually hooking up the iron for the magnetic gear, magnetic English hard magnets, which then will get turned into the magnetic coils. As for the next series that's going to replace this, I'm probably gonna, I really want to redo a RimWorld series and actually finish it, because I know the one I currently have is incomplete. If I remember, I'm gonna make sure I put in the title of that series is incomplete. I probably will not be revisiting it to finish it, just because I don't know where I left off, and I'm not sure that I could finish it, honestly, because I'm no longer like attached to it, so I don't really know where I was going with some of the plans. And yeah, okay, I guess I could rewatch the series myself and kind of try to catch myself up, but there were definitely things that I'm not sure what I was planning or doing, so I unfortunately will more than likely be restarting RimWorld on a new save. But hey, we'll start fresh there. And then for what's going to replace Minecraft when that eventually ends, I'm not sure yet. I'm leaning Satisfactory, but I'm also probably going to be doing 7 Days to Die with some friends once Alpha 21 of that releases. So I'm not sure when that's coming out. Obviously, that's contingent on when Alpha 21 releases, and then yeah. So there's definitely a couple series that I have in mind that I'm, kind of working towards. And once summer comes around, the goal is going to be to try to get a couple series recorded and saved up for backlog. That way, once school starts back up again in the fall, I have some stuff that, can kind of give me some breathing room, especially around times like this where it starts to get towards finals, that I can, kind of just use those. and then just not have to record anything for like 2 or 3 weeks, which would be really, really nice. But we'll see. We'll see how motivated I get over the summer, because I do want to just kind of really relax and mentally take a break from school and, you know, just a lot of things. But hey, we will get there. As for this, we are finishing up. I did go ahead and place some of the ray receivers. I did clump them all up, which isn't the best, because then they're not all... It's not as efficient, because then we're only getting sun from, you know, part of the planet. There were a couple space mishaps that we had, with me not necessarily running out of fuel, but running out of banked power, which then caused me to have to float around for a little bit and try to re-steer, because I was going 20, or the full throttle of 2,000 meters per second, which is not fun trying to steer that. Here you can see me where I started to really disconnect things, and it's like, okay, well, we don't need this anymore, we don't need this, and basically I was only disconnecting the things that we had stockpiled and weren't using a whole lot of, and I was like, okay, well, we're gonna cut this, because clearly it's stockpiled up, we're not using it on any more of the production lines, so let me cut it and kind of go from there, right? And this is really the only demolition we've done so far to the factory. Okay, besides the first remodel of the factory, but this is, I think, you know, the beginning. I don't want to say the beginning of the end, but this is, I think, starting to become the end of the end, right? Okay, and well, yes, we're done with all that building for today. So just kind of a quick recap. I know we mostly went over it throughout the video, but I set up magnets, the gears, electric motors, electromagnetic turbines, circuits, and that was more or less it. And then we kind of touched up on some other things. We did begin deconstructing parts of the factory. I know we kind of began that kind of at near the end, but we are starting to tear up parts of the original factory, which, you know, I'm kind of happy about. I mean, to be fair, this is the second iteration of the factory, 'cause for those of you who've been watching since the beginning, we did have some odd pieces here and there. But yeah. Other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. If you guys did, you guys know to smash that like button if you guys enjoyed. If you haven't already, make sure you guys hit the subscribe button, as it really does help out, and turn on the little bell notification so you don't miss out on any future episodes. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns about anything you saw or anything you didn't see, let me know, and I'll try my best to answer it down below. But other than that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one.